Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed that little rainy interlude. It's very rainy today as I'm painting this piece. Now, in terms of what my video is today, I'm going to be painting a watercolour and gouache panoramic landscape on this lovely Canson Heritage paper. And while I do so, I'd like to discuss what it means to improve your art and my advice and strategy towards improving art. And I bet every person, every artist has always heard that you've just got to paint and you've just got to work at it and you've just got to sit down and do it. It's an old adage, and while it's half right, it is also a little bit misleading because there's a bit more to improving than just sitting down and painting. Where it is right is you have got to start. If you don't start painting, you can't improve, and this is actually really obvious but annoyingly so. If you don't sit down and paint 100 landscapes or 100 characters, you just won't be improving because you need the practice, and it's so cliched, but it really is important. Now, in terms of actually actively improving, because you can just simply sit down and paint every day but see no improvement, what you'll actually want to be doing is kind of analysing how the painting went. So sitting back and thinking, okay, this didn't work, so perhaps, my anatomy's off, I need to practice that, and then actively picking a small focus. So for me, I have been focusing on landscapes and creating a lot of depth in my landscapes, and that has been part of my Year of Art challenge. I kind of fell into landscapes as a topic, and there's no regrets, I absolutely love it. But what has happened is I've needed to sit down each time I painted and kind of analyse what went well, what went wrong, what did I really like is another part of it. Which part went really well is another way. And you can use that analysis to kind of look at what you need to do to improve, and also where you have improved, because it is important to acknowledge where you've improved. But annoyingly, you've got to start painting, so that's where doing challenges is quite a good place to start. So I've been painting and doing the Year of Art challenge, but people on Instagram are doing small challenges like the 100-day, well, it's not a small challenge, but they're doing the 100-day challenges, they're doing 30 days of drawing. Pick whatever topic you'd like to draw. You can even draw for just a week of one topic if you want to paint flowers for a week and practice that. Absolutely fine. You've just got to start, annoyingly, and pick a focus that you can actively practice. Then the other side of it, and this is really hard for me as a perfectionist, but you've got to push yourself to not have to be perfect every time. And this will vary depending on your medium, but especially with watercolour, things will go wrong, annoyingly, and each time something goes wrong, you've got to stop and analyse it and figure out why it went wrong. So with watercolour, maybe the paper just absolutely won't take the paint, and it could be nothing to do with you, but part of improving is kind of stepping back and analysing all those steps that you've taken so far. So maybe the watercolour paper has got some oil or glue on it, and that's why it's rejecting the paint. Or maybe you've scrubbed it too much with your brush, and that's why it's pilling and pieces of the paper coming off. Maybe you didn't let the layer dry fully, and that's why the next layer has lifted the paint. So part of improving is kind of stopping and figuring out where your frustrations are coming from. And all part of that is starting. Now, you don't have to go and paint every single day, or constantly fill a sketchbook or any of these challenges, you could simply decide to paint with a particular medium and get better at a particular part. So maybe you just like to paint portraits and practice that. So annoyingly, starting is the key point of improving, and everybody says it, but it's because it's annoyingly true. Now, the big thing I want to discuss today is something that has really helped me think about improving, and also it's helped me when things aren't going right, because sometimes, and I'm sure every artist feels this, sometimes you know how a painting should turn out, and you can envision it in your head, and you can see this gorgeous landscape or this wonderful portrait with the perfect lighting in your head. But when you come to sit down and actually paint it, it just won't work. And oh, it's so frustrating when that happens. It really is. I've been there way too many times. And there was a theory, I can't remember which account I saw it on, but I saw it on Instagram. So if you do know, let me know down below who the original author of this theory is. But it's what I know as the gap. And the gap is that kind of distance between what you are physically skilled at recreating versus what you can see in your head, what your artist's brain can visualize. So when in your head you've got this beautiful image, this wonderful portrait or landscape or anything of the sort, but you can't actually reproduce it on paper, at least not yet, that is when you're in the gap. And all it is the gap between your skills and your trained brain, like your artist's brain. And this is one of the most frustrating parts of improving. Now, when you hit the gap, the only way to get out of it is to keep going. And that is the most frustrating part about improving your art, is that you can sit and practice all you like, but when you hit the gap, it feels like you're starting all over again. And it's so frustrating, but it's really good to stop and analyze that actually you are feeling frustrated because you're in the gap. You're hitting that point where you're starting to get mentally skilled that you can envision something so detailed or with this particular lighting, but you've not yet practiced recreating that, and you're in that point where you're trying something new. Now, I have been through the gap several times, and it's not fun. It's really not. And it sort of goes alongside art block. Now, art block is something different, but oftentimes they kind of go hand in hand. When you're feeling uninspired and you just cannot paint, sometimes it is also because you're in the gap, and you maybe lose a little bit of confidence when you are in the gap, because your brain and your hand, they're just not working on the same line. If you think of a graph, then you're kind of on two different lines, and it's really discombobulating, I think is a good word for it. And it can knock your confidence a bit, which is often what's caused my art blocks, is just not feeling confident. And something that helps me when I hit that point that nothing's coming out right and I just can't do it, is to give myself permission to mess up, to not have to be perfect, to push through and experiment. Oftentimes, I give myself a little break. Now, with the Year of Art challenge, you can't really take a break, but sometimes I'll just make a simpler watercolour piece, maybe all in one colour, maybe a colour I've never painted with before. One time I took, it's called green umber, and it's one I'd not used before ever because I thought it was just a bit too brown, and I made a whole piece from it. And I challenged myself to do that, and it was almost refreshing So setting yourself little experiments, maybe with a medium you've never used before or a colour you've ignored, can help you be a little bit more experimental, and it'll allow you to give yourself the space to actually push through and still create a piece of art. Because when you're in the gap, it's quite easy to just give up and go back to painting something that's easy or creating something that feels more natural. Perhaps you've pushed yourself into the gap by trying something new, and that's a really good thing. That is part of improving, but it's also very uncomfortable to feel like you can't do something and to not have the confidence to put your paintbrush into the water and kind of grab that paint and try something new, especially when it goes wrong and you've had such a wonderful vision in your mind and it just won't go onto paper. But the most important thing is to take a step back and look back on where you have been. And if you're a beginner and you're trying to improve, look back and see that you've come so far that you have picked up a paintbrush or a pencil and you're giving it a go. And that is an achievement in itself. To give yourself the leeway to actually experiment and try something new, which can be really scary, even though it shouldn't really be. It is scary to kind of put yourself out there and try something. So that is really the way to battle the gap, is to keep going, but maybe change direction slightly to kind of give yourself a break from fighting the gap. Because if you fight it, you'll just end up kind of in a stalemate with yourself, where you're putting the pressure on yourself to produce a piece of art or to retry, and if it's not going to work, sometimes it is best to step back. But when you do step back, don't just stop. It might be a case of looking back on your old sketchbooks and kind of analysing how much you've improved, because I bet if you look at the beginning of your sketchbook and the end of your sketchbook, or the middle of your sketchbook even, you'll see that you have actually improved. And sometimes artists just don't stop to acknowledge that. So, I hope this has been interesting. As someone who has been painting every day and going through the motions of the gap every 3 weeks throughout this Year of Art challenge, I have been through it a couple times, and I fully sympathise with anybody out there feeling frustrated with their art. But I really do think that it's just part of the creative process. And if you are feeling frustrated, you're in the gap, and the gap is a good place to be, even though it's really uncomfortable. The gap does mean you're improving. If you're feeling uncomfortable and pushing to, change your techniques and to try new things, or you've tried something new and it's not working out, that's still really impressive. And that is the way to improve. It's to keep pushing. Try a new medium, try a new experiment, but don't forget to take it easy on yourself. If it's going wrong, take a step back and maybe grab your sketchbook and repaint something that you did before, and show yourself that actually, by practicing and by painting, you actually are improving. And give yourself that little confidence boost and a bit of space to accept how things are turning out. And just by keeping going and starting, even, is also important. Starting a new painting, starting a new project, you'll have really improved your own artistic journey. And I'm going to stop rambling and say thank you for listening to my rambles, and I hope this has helped you, because it really does help me. And one thing that helps me even more is to think, I can't do it yet. Don't say I can't do it. You just can't do it yet. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day wherever you are. It'd be lovely if you subscribed and left a little comment down below. Thanks so much. Bye.